They say the suburbs are quiet for a reason. Perfect lawns, polite smiles, picket fences, all hiding the things no one wants to talk about. When I moved into Maple Hills, I wasn't looking for trouble. I just wanted peace, a place to breathe, to start fresh. But what I found behind the gates, beneath the manicured hedges and hollow greetings, was something older than property lines: entitlement control. And a woman who thought she owned more than just her house. She thought she owned the rules. This isn't just a story about a pool, it's about power, and what happens when someone finally says, "Not this time." The sun was setting over Maple Hills, casting a soft golden hue across the manicured lawns and pristine driveways of the suburban neighborhood. Everything here looked like it came out of a luxury real estate brochure. White fences, trimmed hedges, families walking golden retrievers like clockwork. But to Darius Monroe, it still didn't feel like home. He leaned against the glass sliding door of his newly purchased home, sipping ginger tea, watching the light dance on the surface of his backyard pool. It was more than a luxury, it was a milestone. Years of hard work, long nights building his real estate startup from scratch, and now here he was, 35, single, self-made, and the first black homeowner in Maple Hills. He hadn't expected a welcome party. He didn't need one, but he hadn't expected her either. Cynthia Wallace, his real estate agent, had muttered under her breath the day he moved in with a quick shake of the head, "Just stay polite and keep your distance." Polite. And that advice made sense 2 days later when Darius came home early from a meeting and saw someone stretched out on a lounger beside his pool, sunglasses on, glass of lemonade in hand, like she owned the place. For a moment he stood frozen inside, blinking. He hadn't invited anyone over. His friends didn't just show up unannounced, and she was using his towel. He stepped outside. "Excuse me." "Oh," she said casually, lifting her sunglasses just enough to meet his eyes. "You must be Darnell." "It's Darius." Right. I'm Cynthia, your neighbor." She waved vaguely toward the house to the left. "You don't mind, do you? I used to come over here all the time. Previous owners never had an issue." He forced a polite smile. "I'm sure they didn't, but this is private property." She tilted her head, a smile tugging at her lips that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, I'll just finish my drink." Darius didn't push it. It was his first week. He didn't want drama, but drama didn't care what he wanted. The next time was worse. He was working from home, deep in spreadsheets, when he glanced at the security feed and saw Cynthia again. This time with a friend, both in wide-brimmed hats and cover-ups, laughing by the pool. He went outside this time, less patient. "Cynthia, this isn't a community pool. I need you to leave." "Relax," she said, rolling her eyes. "You really think locking a gate changes history? I watched this neighborhood grow from dirt roads and dirt people." Darius froze. He hadn't misheard. Her friend tensed, said nothing. "I'd like you to leave." Now. She left, but slowly. No apology, no embarrassment, just that look, an old, deep kind of disdain that made his skin crawl. That night, Darius walked the perimeter of his yard, measuring the angles of visibility, the lines of access. He called a contractor the next morning to install a new iron gate, electronic locks, motion lights, and security cameras covering every inch of the property. He also bought a sign: "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." It didn't feel aggressive. It felt necessary. For 48 hours, the peace was almost too quiet. Then came the sirens. 2 days after he installed the new security gate, Darius heard a rattling outside, sharp, erratic. Not the wind, not an animal. He walked to the control panel in the hallway, tapped the screen. There she was, Cynthia Wallace, hands gripping the gate like it had personally insulted her. Her face was red, twisted into something primal. She shook it violently, shouting though the cameras couldn't catch every word. But some words came through clearly. "Unbelievable. That little punk. How dare he?" Darius didn't move. He didn't need to. He simply pressed record. A minute later, she pulled out her phone and began pacing in front of his driveway. Her voice lifted as she spoke, and even without sound, the performance was obvious. Wild gestures clutching her chest, pointing at the house. Seconds later, he heard its sirens. He didn't panic. Instead, Darius stepped outside, calm, both hands visible. 2 police cruisers slowed to a stop in front of his home. Cynthia ran to them dramatically, like she'd rehearsed it in her bathroom mirror. "Thank God you're here," she exclaimed. "That man, he locked me out. He's threatening me. He's unstable." One of the officers, older and with tired eyes, turned to Darius. "Sir, can we speak with you?" "Of course," Darius said. "Would you like to see the footage?" Cynthia's face flickered, a twitch of panic breaking through the act. Darius handed his phone to the officer. The man watched the video silently. Then he handed it to his partner, who raised an eyebrow partway through. "Ma'am," the first officer said carefully, "this is his property, and this footage shows you trying to break in." Cynthia's composure cracked. "It's not like that. He's been harassing me for weeks. I feel unsafe. He's creating an environment of hostility." Darius didn't even blink. "The only hostility here is your entitlement. I've never even raised my voice to her." The younger officer stepped forward. "If you return here without permission again, ma'am, it will be considered criminal trespassing." Cynthia's face turned the color of wine. "You're taking his side." "It's not about sides," the officer replied. "It's about evidence." As they walked her back to her home, Cynthia shouted over her shoulder, "This isn't over, Darius. You'll regret making an enemy out of me." But Darius didn't feel threatened. He felt something far worse, exhausted. That night, as he reviewed the footage again, he couldn't shake the feeling gnawing in his chest. This wasn't just one angry neighbor. This was personal. It was historical. It was generational. And he knew deep in his gut she wasn't done. The morning after the police incident, Darius found something strange. There was chalk writing on his driveway. Just one word written in large, uneven capital letters, "Out." He stared at it for a long time, longer than he needed to. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't even permanent. But something about it echoed. It wasn't just a message. It was a statement of ownership, of territory. And it wasn't the last. Over the next week, Cynthia stopped using the pool, but she didn't disappear. Every morning she was on her porch, seated like a guard, coffee in hand, sunglasses on, silent, watching, judging. When Darius would take out the trash, she'd whisper just loud enough, "Shame how quickly neighborhoods change, isn't it?" One night he returned from dinner to find a torn piece of paper taped to his door. No signature, just a scrawled message in blocky handwriting. "People like you don't last long in Maple Hills." He brought it inside, laid it on the kitchen counter, stared at it. Not because he was afraid, but because he was tired of pretending he wasn't angry. Darius had always believed in handling conflict with dignity, with composure. But that had limits, and Cynthia was testing every single one of them. He decided to file a formal complaint with the HOA. He submitted footage, timestamps, copies of notes, photos of the chalk. A week passed. Then a short reply came from the HOA board. "Thank you for your concern. We have spoken with Ms. Wallace. We encourage all neighbors to seek peaceful resolution and avoid further escalation." No follow-up. No action. They weren't interested in justice, just silence, and Cynthia knew it. That was the worst part. That weekend, he walked into the local coffee shop and noticed a group of residents at a table in the corner. They were whispering. One woman looked up, caught his gaze, then quickly looked away. Cynthia's influence was quiet but poisonous. She didn't scream anymore. She whispered. She didn't break in. She got others to question if maybe Darius was aggressive, difficult, or not fitting the culture. Darius sat in his home that night, scrolling through old security footage. Not watching, just scanning. Looking for something, anything to remind himself he wasn't crazy, that this wasn't just in his head. That's when an idea came to him. One his mentor once told him during a business deal gone wrong: if something doesn't make sense at the surface, start digging into the foundation. So Darius opened his laptop and he began to dig. Darius didn't sleep much that night. Instead, he found himself staring at a blank Google search bar at 1:43 a.m., fingers hovering over the keys. He wasn't even sure what he was looking for, but he had a gut feeling, and if life had taught him anything, it was that gut feelings were rarely wrong. He started with Cynthia Wallace's name. Not much came up: a few photos from community events, some HOA newsletters, and a single article about her winning a neighborhood beautification award in 2015. All surface-level fluff. But Darius knew how to go deeper. He'd closed multi-million-dollar real estate deals by researching property histories and tax records. Now he used those same tools not to buy land, but to understand the landmine he'd moved next to. Cynthia Wallace's maiden name, Cynthia Wainwright. And that opened the door. A few archive databases, and $2,990 later, Darius was staring at an old newspaper clipping from 1983, yellowed and scanned, barely legible. Local protest turns violent. Wainwright family accused of inciting racial unrest outside desegregation vote hearing. Cynthia's father, Richard Wainwright, had been a vocal member of a white nationalist group, not the hood-wearing kind, the suit and tie kind, the ones who donated, organized, and masked hate under the language of heritage and tradition. Darius sat back exhaling. He wasn't surprised, but he was still shaken. He dug deeper. Land records, county court filings, a sealed civil case in 1996. Plaintiff's name redacted, but it involved workplace harassment and racial intimidation at a textile plant. The defendant, a Cynthia W. supervisor. No criminal charges. Quiet settlement buried. But the worst came next. In an obscure local forum, he stumbled across a thread discussing the old Hollow Ridge fire, an unsolved case from 2002 where a rental property owned by the Wainwright family burned to the ground with a single tenant trapped inside a young black man who had filed multiple complaints about harassment and unsafe conditions just 2 months earlier. The fire was ruled accidental, but in the comments beneath the post, someone wrote, "Everyone in town knew the Wallace woman had a hand in it. But she had friends in the county office. Case never went anywhere." Darius felt something sink deep into his chest. This wasn't about a pool or a gate or even personal prejudice. This was a legacy of hatred sharpened over decades and disguised as neighborly concern. Cynthia didn't just hate his presence. She felt threatened by his very existence in a place she believed her family had built and defined. That night, Darius saved every document, screenshot, and archived article into a secured drive. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do with it all yet. But he knew one thing. Cynthia had spent her life hiding behind power, behind smiles and sweet tea and HOA titles. And now he held the match. Darius didn't go to the police. He went to the press. Specifically, Janelle Brooks, a local investigative journalist known for her relentless coverage of racial injustice and systemic abuse in North Carolina suburbs. He sent her everything. PDFs, links, scanned clippings, timestamps from the security camera footage. No dramatization, no demands, just the truth. By the next morning, she replied, "I've seen a lot, but this is a story people need to hear." 3 days later, the article dropped. The Pool, the Gate, and the Woman Who Never Let Go. The Real History of Cynthia Wallace. It opened with the 911 call, laid out the trespassing footage, then traced Cynthia's family history through decades of intimidation, civil complaints, and whispered allegations that never saw daylight. The article didn't scream. It spoke cold, hard facts backed by records, quotes, and public archives. It painted a picture far larger than Cynthia's tantrums. It revealed how people like her with enough privilege and plausible deniability had shaped neighborhoods like Maple Hills through quiet exclusion and unspoken rules. The reaction was instant. The article went viral in Charlotte within hours. Darius didn't post it, but his inbox flooded. Former residents of Maple Hills wrote to say they had once tried to buy in, only to be told their credit wasn't strong enough or the house had just gone off market. One woman said Cynthia once told her during an HOA inspection that some aesthetics just don't suit our vision. Darius barely had time to process it before the doorbell rang. He opened it and found Cynthia on his porch holding her phone in one hand and a trembling cup of coffee in the other. "You did this," she hissed, voice tight, controlled rage brimming beneath the surface. "You think you're some kind of hero? I think I told the truth," he replied calmly. She took a step closer. "My life is falling apart because of you. My daughter's job, my name, my community. You destroyed it." "No," Darius said, voice even. "You did. I just stopped covering for it." Cynthia's face twisted. For the first time, Darius saw not the cold, smug neighbor, but someone unraveling. Unused to consequence, addicted to control. Then she snapped. She lunged clumsy, wild, fueled by fury. But before she could lay a finger on him, Darius stepped back. His motion lights triggered. And then, flashing red and blue. 2 squad cars pulled up silently. One officer exited, hand near his belt. "Ma'am, step away from him." "What? He's framing me." "He's ruining my life," Cynthia cried. "Ma'am," the officer repeated firmer, "you've been under surveillance for online threats made in connection with this investigation. We have a warrant for questioning." Cynthia froze. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She tried to run. Got 5 steps, then tripped on the curb, crashing down in a heap of panic and sweat and disbelief. The officers moved in. One read her rights. The other cuffed her. She screamed something incoherent. Darius couldn't make it out. But the neighborhood heard windows opened, phones recorded, And for once, Cynthia Wallace wasn't controlling the narrative. She was the narrative. The courtroom was smaller than Darius expected. No grand balconies or towering ceilings, just fluorescent lights, worn benches, and a tension that you could cut with a knife. Yet somehow the room felt larger than life that morning. Maybe it was the cameras in the back. Maybe it was the quiet hum of whispers. Or maybe it was the fact that for the first time in decades, Cynthia Wallace wasn't pulling the strings. She sat at the defense table thinner than before, dressed in gray slacks and a high-neck sweater trying to look harmless. Her hair was tied tight, her hands clasped, but her eyes, those sharp scanning eyes, were still searching, for pity, for allies, for power. She didn't find any Judge Elaine Morrison, a stern woman with a reputation for cutting through theatrics, entered the room. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise." Darius stood slow and steady. He hadn't planned to testify. He didn't want revenge. He wanted accountability. But when the prosecutor asked if he'd like to make a statement before sentencing, he found himself nodding. He stepped up to the podium. The room went quiet. "This was never about a pool," he began. "It wasn't about noise or fences or rules. It was about the unspoken things. The things people like me are taught not to name out loud because it makes others uncomfortable." He glanced toward Cynthia. Her jaw clenched. What happened wasn't just personal. It was systemic. It was repeated. It was expected because for years no one stopped it. I wasn't her first target, but I'll be damned if I'm just another person who lets it slide. He ended with one line. Silence is what allowed her to thrive. Truth is what finally stopped her. When he returned to his seat, the judge took a long pause. Then she spoke. "Ms. Wallace, your actions show a clear pattern of harassment, deception, and abuse of influence. You used fear manipulation and historical bias to control those around you, and when that no longer worked, you tried to weaponize the law against the very person you targeted." Cynthia didn't move. "You are hereby sentenced to 6 months in county jail for filing false police reports, making criminal threats, and trespassing with intent to harass. In addition, you are placed under a 5-year restraining order and are permanently banned from serving on any community board in the state of North Carolina." The gavel struck like thunder. Cynthia's face remained expressionless for exactly 3 seconds until her lips trembled. Her breath caught, and for the first time she looked afraid. Not angry, not defiant, afraid. 1 week later. Maple Hills felt different. For the first time in months, Darius walked through the neighborhood without glances, whispers, or tension. People waved, some stopped to talk, not apologies, just presence. That was enough. Then on a quiet Sunday morning, he opened his front door and froze. There was a small note on his porch, handwritten, no signature, just one line. "Thank you for not letting her speak for all of us." Below it, a paper plate with a slice of peach cobbler still warm. Later that afternoon, a group of neighbors, black, white, Latino, Asian, gathered near his pool. No party, no speeches, just people together. Darius stood with a plate in one hand and a glass of iced tea in the other, watching the sunset ripple across the water. He thought about how easy it would have been to sell the house, to disappear, to let the story fade. But instead he stayed. And because of that, something broke. Not him, the cycle.